via conference call in accordance with the Municipal Government Act, Section 199. Council chambers is open for public attendance. However, councillors and members of the public may still join meetings using our current teleconference process. If you've submitted a comment request to administration prior to the meeting, the chair will call on you at the appropriate time. The chair may also ask for comments and concerns from the public relating to a particular topic. And at this time, phone lines will be unmuted. If you would like to speak, please state your name. Individuals will be allotted 5 minutes to speak or 10 minutes for a group as per our procedure bylaw. If the meeting is recessed, callers will be put on hold until the meeting reconvenes, with the exception at noon, where callers will be asked to call back in. This helps with call quality. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and may be uploaded to our website and/or social media. To eliminate background noise, please mute your phone during the meeting. We also ask all attendees to mute their devices to reduce disruptions to the meeting. Everyone has a right to be present at council meetings and council committee meetings. Any attendees that are considered disruptive to the progression of the meeting may be removed at the discretion of the chair as per the MGA Section 198. We thank you for your cooperation and understanding. We have an agenda before us. Does anybody have any additions or changes?
Yes, to the chair. Administration has one item to add, and it's just due to the request from the organizational meeting earlier this morning. So administration is proposing under 7.8 to have council ratify a letter declining FCM conference attendance due to lack of relevance for rural Alberta.
Thank you, CAO Henderson. Any other additions or changes? Oh, pardon me.
I would like to ask if council would consider adding an agenda item for reimbursement for per diem and mileage for my attendance at the ASHA Regional Convention. I know in our bylaws where members who sit on the board are permitted to attend the AGM or the main convention, but this is a regional one, and so I just like council's consideration of that.
Let's add that under 7.9. Any other additions or changes? A motion to approve the agenda as amended. Deputy Ruth Clausen.
So moved.
Thank you. Any questions or discussion? I'll call the question. Just a reminder to flip over to the October 15th regular council meeting on eScribe. And that motion is carried. Are there any notices of motion? We'll move to agenda item 3.1, bylaw 2024-06. Looking for a motion to open the public hearing for bylaw 2024-06.
I will make that motion.
Thank you, Councillor Eichert. And we'll recess from our regular council meeting. Any questions or discussion on the motion? I'll call the question. Motion is carried. I'll call the public hearing to order. Good morning, everyone. As per section 193 of our procedure bylaw 2023, I think it's actually 2024-24, The public hearing will be conducted in the following order. First, we'll have a report by our administration. Then there will be a presentation by the applicant. Then we'll open the floor for presentations by the public in support of the proposal. Then there will be an opportunity for presentations by the public in opposition to the proposal. Then there will be an opportunity for a rebuttal presentation by the applicant, limited only to the comments heard or read in opposition to the proposal. Then there will be an opportunity for final questions of our administration from council. Then council will close the public hearing. The applicant will have a maximum of 20 minutes to present. All individuals supporting or opposing the proposal will have up to 5 minutes to speak, and any groups of individuals will have up to 10 minutes to speak. The applicant will then have a maximum of 10 minutes to present their rebuttal. If there are any questions relating to this process, please refer to our procedure bylaw. Can administration please verify that notice of this public hearing was circulated in accordance with the MGA?
Good morning, Reeve-Link. Yes, notice of the public hearing was circulated in accordance with the Act. Landowners within 1 mile of the subject site and the proposed haul route were notified of the application when it was received by the county, and then again in advance of today's public hearing. And all comments provided have been included in the package starting on page 20. There was one letter of opposition provided by the adjacent landowner to the north of the subject site, and no late submissions were received after the agenda was published.
Thank you. We'll now open the floor for administration.
Good morning, Council. Taylor Felt with the county's Planning and Development Services team, here to present Bylaw 2024-06 for Council's consideration. Referring to the location map found on page 12 of Council's agenda package, the subject lands are located 5.5 kilometers northeast of the hamlet of Clunie, immediately southeast of the intersection of Township Road 224 and Range Road 213. The application proposes to redesignate 32 acres within the northwest 22-22-21 west of the 4th Meridian from the Agricultural General District to the Natural Resource Extraction and Processing District in order to allow for the future development of aggregate extraction and processing operations. The lands not impacted by the extraction operation are proposed to remain designated Agricultural General District and will continue to be used for agricultural production. The proposed NRE district was configured in consideration of environmental features on the land and the proximity of adjacent landowners, which I'll discuss later in this presentation. Historically, aggregate extraction took place on a portion of the site identified within Phase 1, which is identified on the diagram I have on the screen here. The proposed project will be excavated in 3 phases and progressively reclaimed over a 40-year period. The processing of aggregate will take place Monday to Saturday from 7 a.m. until 7 p.m. with the exemption of statutory holidays, and 3 employees are anticipated to be on site at any given time. The primary activity at the site will be gravel screening, with some crushing required and carried out for approximately 60 days during the summer months, and most of the trucking is also anticipated during these summer months as well. Natural resource extraction and processing operations are subject to several special requirements under Section 9.1 of the county's land use bylaw at either the land use redesignation or the development permit stage. And I'll review some of these requirements and how the applicant addressed each in their application submission here briefly. In terms of a haul route, the applicants have identified a 3.4 kilometer portion of Range Road 213 that extends from the site access south to Highway 1, which the applicants provided in this diagram. You can see the highlighted portion in yellow there. The applicants anticipate an average of 6 trucks hauling at one time, with a combined total of 75 round trips per day during peak demand. But a transportation impact assessment will be required at the development permit stage to confirm traffic volumes and identify any improvements to the county's transportation infrastructure. The applicants are also required to address noise concerns and visual impacts caused by the extraction operation at the development permit stage, but they have given consideration to measures that may mitigate any nuisances at this time. Section 9.7J of the land use bylaw requires berming to screen gravel pit sites from public roadways. The applicants have provided rationale for not using soil berms to screen the pits from public roadways, which I'll let them expand further in their presentation. But generally, their rationale for not using soil berms is that the amount of soil required to construct effective berms would require greater stripping of the area, therefore disturbing more land than is required for the aggregate operation. And this would prevent the remaining farmland from being utilized and could potentially impact returning the land to an agricultural use when the project's completed in the future. The applicants have proposed planting shrubs and trees on the quarter to provide a visual barrier from adjacent residences. And these have been identified on the screen here in the bright green dashed lines along the northern property boundary and along the western property boundary between the site and the adjacent residence. The applicant noted in their proposal that visual impacts will be mitigated by the natural topography of the site, established mature tree lines on adjacent properties, which they've highlighted in a green buffer, and then the additional plantings that they've proposed. Again, the requirements can be confirmed at the development permit stage to the satisfaction of the Municipal Planning Commission. Additional measures to reduce dust from leaving the site are outlined on the bottom of page 5 of the staff report, including a maximum 2-meter drop height for crushing and screening, and by placing machines and equipment at the bottom of the excavated areas, which the proposal notes will also reduce any noise emanating from the site. Several technical reports were submitted to understand the potential for environmental impacts, drainage and erosion on the site, and other related concerns. These include a phase 1 environmental site assessment, a reclamation plan, which included a drainage assessment, a wetland assessment and impact report, which included an assessment of wildlife and wetlands on and adjacent to the site, and other relevant biophysical components. The phase 1 ESA did not identify the potential for contamination at the site based on previous activities on the land. Therefore, a phase 2 ESA is not required at the development permit stage. The wetland assessment and impact report identified and classified 3 wetlands found adjacent to the proposed project area, which is the orange boundary on the diagram here on the screen. And none of these were identified as Crown assets. The project area was configured to avoid disturbing the 3 main wetlands and provided appropriate buffers to ensure that the riparian areas are not affected by the extraction activities. The wildlife assessment did not raise any particular items of concern, but the findings do recommend that further investigation be conducted prior to development at the site. The report did recommend that an erosion and sediment control plan be provided if the project proceeds to the development permit stage. The county's third-party consultants agree with this recommendation and have also recommended an environmental construction operations plan to be provided. And the county's consultants have also recommended that the developer retain an environmental monitor to track potential environmental concerns during active operations. The land use bylaw addresses adjacent residential development under section 9.7AA, which states that no redesignation to the NRE district shall be approved within 650 feet or approximately 200 meters of an existing dwelling on an adjacent parcel. And this setback is measured from the property line of the subject parcel to the neighboring residential dwelling. So you can see on the diagram that I have up on the screen here, or page 18 of the agenda package, that there is one residence that falls within this setback area. So in response to this, the applicants have located the proposed excavation area within phases 2 and 3 of the project, further back from that north property line. And this provides an additional 230-meter buffer from the dwelling to the north. Alternatively, the applicant would be required to subdivide a portion of this northwest corner of the quarter to meet the requirement, which would further fragment the land. Lastly, applicants proposing the redesignation of lands to the NRE district are required to undertake community consultation prior to them submitting their application to the county. And the applicant has satisfied this requirement, and their communication consultation package and summary can be found on page 86 of the agenda package here. The municipal development plan outlines some broader policy implications. Aggregate extraction is considered under section 3.8, natural resource development, with the primary objective to ensure that natural resources are managed safely and effectively, and that extraction activities are respectful of surrounding land uses. Specifically, policy 3.8.2.1 requires strategies to minimize the impact that natural resource development may have on infrastructure, the natural environment, and resident quality of life. And further, policy 3.8.2.5 requires natural resource applications to demonstrate that they will cause no adverse impacts on the natural environment and mitigate any anticipated impacts. Along with the other requirements in the land use bylaw, technical studies were provided in order to address environmental concerns and provide mitigation strategies to minimize the impact to adjacent residents. And as noted throughout the staff report, these studies and plans generally confirm that development can proceed to the next stage without having negative impacts on the natural environment or to adjacent landowners. However, there are additional reports and further details that will be required and need to be addressed at the development permit stage. And with that, administration is making the recommendation that council grant all 3 readings of bylaw 2024-06 today. And that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions regarding administration's report? I will now invite a presentation by the applicant. And if anybody speaking can please just state your name. And for those ratepayers who may be presenting, if you can state your name and your address, please. Perfect, thank you.
Good morning. My name is Megan Sohn, and I own and operate Amos Creek Aggregate Consulting. So I have this presentation prepared today on behalf of McNair Sand and Gravel. And so this is our site. You'll notice it has wonky boundaries. Not all pits have shapes and sizes that are the same, but we usually have to follow where the aggregate is found. So it doesn't always come in a box. And so these are the areas that we have found are the best areas for mining. The blue dashed circles that you see, like Taylor mentioned earlier, are areas of wetlands. So we had a wetland assessment done, and these are the areas that they have asked us to avoid in order to maintain those wetlands appropriately. So that's why we've carved out those round bits in our development. So we have made plans to still mine and develop those areas effectively without harming the wetlands in that area. So we know that people don't like and hope and dream to live beside a gravel pit. So we understand that. And so what we want to explain is why this site. Why do we feel that this is a good site to be mining in, even though we know we have neighbors? So this type of gravel that's found at this site is fairly rare. The top layer is more common and can be used easily, but the lower level of gravel found deeper is quite rare to find and is highly sought after, especially in our southern Alberta area. So it's called natural round rock. It's typically used for drainage systems because it doesn't clog, or it's easy to maintain and highly effective for drainage. And also for roofing ballast. So all of these buildings and infrastructure that's going up need the roofing ballast. It holds the roofing materials down so they don't get blown away with uplift and wind currents, that kind of thing. And exposed concrete. It's durable, it's cost effective, and used by residential, commercial, all kinds. It can be recycled afterward to use in asphalt projects. There's a lot of very useful materials found by being able to attain this round rock. So that's why this site is highly sought after, or why we feel we can use it. This pit is within proximity to a lot of major centers. Calgary is not that far away, relatively speaking. I understand there's a wheatland industrial area that's going to be created and developed soon. So these materials will likely fall into the category of needs for that project as well. There's a lot of things locally that can be used by, or this gravel pit can be utilized by. So we did do community consultation, as Taylor mentioned. Again, we know gravel pits are not the most beautiful things to live beside, but we have tried to meet the needs and mitigate as much as we possibly can. McNair has actually, I've been doing consulting, and I actually previously worked with Alberta Environment reviewing gravel pit applications. And in my career, I have not seen too many of the concessions that McNair has offered to make. The biggest one being they are willing to limit their processing season to avoid the greenhouse season. The greenhouse is located to the north. They're the adjacent property to the north. And it's not often operators are willing to modify their operational season to accommodate a landowner or a neighbor. So I thought that was a very huge and important thing to mind. So the processing would include excavation, crushing, and screening of product. The crushing would be limited to that upper layer of the rough rock that I mentioned earlier. The lower rock, the round stuff, we like it round, so we won't be needing to crush that. So in most cases, the crushing would occur only with that top layer of aggregate as it's exposed. The dust was one of the major issues that was brought up, and what we've tried to do is we're going to locate all of our crushing equipment or that kind of thing in the lower areas of the pit. Many times we're a handful of meters below the original surface. So by locating machinery down there, it can kind of create walls or an amphitheater kind of scenario where it can limit both noise and dust coming from the site. So that's one thing that they're going to do. Also, if it does get quite dusty, they can bring water in from an approved off-site location with water trucks and spray the equipment or the ground or access roads or whatever needs to be done to mitigate that dust transfer to surrounding properties. Also, there will be whatever the county says we would be doing on the county roads with the haul road. So that will also limit the dust from the traffic. And the visual blight. So also locating it lower down, you won't see as much. And as Taylor mentioned, the berms that we plan to do. So I know the county has berms, and what we've done is under the definitions of the county bylaws, we're doing a partial berm. So the soil, we don't have enough soil to build a high enough soil berm in the locations provided. I noticed in my seat, I couldn't see my little green dashed lines as well as I had hoped, but there's one directly on the southwest corner there along where the residence to the west is located, and then again in the northwest corner there. And so we don't have enough soil that we can strip to create high enough berms. And if we did create those high enough berms, we'd have to strip more material sooner than we'd need to do that. And then we're just disturbing more land that can't be utilized by agriculture or, you know, whatever else. So what we've asked to do is do a partial berm under the definitions of the bylaw, which includes strategic placement of trees. And so we will talk with an arborist who can refer us to appropriate species that can achieve both successful growth as well as quick growth to create those visual berms sooner than later, and also thick enough vegetation that will actually block the view a little bit more. So we've placed those so that it's the residences that will not have that visual contact with the operational areas. And the little highlighted green sections, the solid green within the residential areas is where there already is mature tree stands. So that helps us on its own a little bit as far as blocking views. But just to make sure and maintain that visual break, we've proposed to add the additional trees. And as far as the residential setback, we do understand that we are asking to that concession of allowing us to not subdivide that top corner in order to meet the residential setback requirement. It has extended that setback where our proposed area is to about 350 meters rather than the required 198. So it is more than is required, even though we're asking for that, what's the word I'm looking for, the concession to not have to subdivide that top corner. So that way it doesn't fragment the land as much and allows it to continue being agricultural use and so forth. The Hall route, as Taylor showed you already, there is only the one residence along that Hall route that's directly to the west of the pit area. Again, we've had consultation. Monty and Miles both met face-to-face with both the landowners. That was discussed and they didn't seem to have any major issues with it. And so it's just the one residence. The other access, the main access on there is that other aggregate operation to the south there, just above the Highway 1 intersection. So relatively low impact there as far as residential use goes. Again, the traffic impact assessment, like Taylor mentioned, will be conducted if the zoning is granted. So, yeah. And this was just another discussion about the split zoning, but it gives you an idea of the area of agricultural use surrounding the site. Another reason why we would request the split zoning and allow that to mean agricultural surrounding our proposed area. So right now, again, as Taylor mentioned, that area in the southwest corner has been disturbed for many years. I'm sure many of you who know the area well have seen that site and that old pit sitting there for a really long time. And without another operator coming in, technically it is unreclaimed and more or less unusable other than for aggregate operations. The topsoil has been removed, so it can't really be seeded. Pasture doesn't grow in gravel very well, so it's relatively unusable as it is. So McNair willing to reclaim that area and include it in its areas of operation in the long run does help make that site a more functionable area. So that is one bonus of them including this in their site. The aggregate is fairly clean. No washing is required, which means they will not be digging into the groundwater. There's no intersection of the groundwater table, and there's no drilling of wells to access groundwater. So we should not be impacting anybody's groundwater wells. There should be no cones of depression sucking water away from anybody. That is an ideal site from an environmental perspective concerning water. So dry is nice to have. They can return it to the equivalent land capability. They have enough material there to spread it over the site and allow for a decent crop or pasture or whatever needs to be growing there afterward as far as the landowner and the agricultural use that's desired. Easy integration. Right now, the site is fairly undulating. So it's easy with the depression created by a pit to integrate that into the undulating surrounding area. So that makes it an easy integration into the surrounding area. And it also can be operated for its current agricultural purposes until those future phases are required. They would be putting up temporary fences or markers of some sort to indicate those areas of operation to limit their staff to make sure that they know the current phase of operations and how to go about that, and then they can separate the agricultural use from the mining use. And because that gravel type is highly sought after, in theory, pits can be closed based on the demand. So if there's a lot of demand for this type of aggregate, in theory, we may be able to close and fully reclaim the site sooner than we maybe would have on just standard types of gravel. So also another plus. So we understand that going forward, we're not done once rezoning is decided. We have an application prepared for Alberta Environment in our back pocket, just waiting to find out if this is even a possibility. So the application to Alberta Environment will be required to, again, discuss drainage plans. They will re-review our wetland assessments and conclusions, and they will be required to provide financial security as well, based on the amount of material for replacement at the site. So we understand we're still on the line for quite a few things moving forward still, but we are ready for that, and those applications have been prepared. We have also received an approval from Alberta Arts and Culture regarding historical uses and that kind of thing. So we're good to go there. They gave us our approval with no conditions and no concerns. So, and just to reiterate a few of the things that I've talked about, the gravel that's there is great, well sought after gravel. McNair wants to be good neighbors. They have met face to face. They want to continue discussions and make sure that going forward, they're not creating issues that we didn't think of or that happen to come up. They have phone numbers that they are willing to pass along and discuss with the neighbors. We want to be good neighbors. And progressive reclamation will go on throughout the life of the pit, making sure that we only have open what we need to continue those operations. We will be reclaiming as soon as one pit is depleted and no longer needed for operations. And also, we know all the different regulatory bodies that we need to be discussing our activities with. So that will continue on as we go on from today and sorting out all the different requirements and authorizations that we need to meet those needs as best as we can. So that's kind of the end of my little presentation. And I think questions come after. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you. I will open the floor for presentations by the public in support of the proposal. I'll call a second time for anyone who would like to speak in support of the application.
Do I have to press anything?
It's good to go if you just state
Okay.
your name and your address.
Pardon?
If you can just state your name and your address.
I'm Diane Brown, and we are the actual landowners. And simple to say, we're in very huge support of the proposal. Okay.
I'll call a third time for any members of the public who would like to speak in support of the proposal. Hearing none, we'll move to any members of the public who would like to present in opposition of the proposal. And if you can just state your name and your address.
My name is Kara Shepherd. My address is 230076 Range Road 231. Good afternoon, good morning, whatever we're at right now. I'm an employee of Val and Norm Brassard for the greenhouse. First of all, we'd like to state we're not completely opposed to the gravel pit. We understand that there's always a place for this, it's needed. So we're not at all opposed to the pit. We are having concerns with the dust mitigation for the travel, for the hauling travel. It's okay if the road or if the haul goes to the highway. Our concern is any of the trucks that are moving from the pit to the north or east and west travel. I actually work for a manure spreading company, and wind can change at the drop of a hat. So our concern is always, as far as the dust goes, for the business and for the health of anybody that is at their address for sure. I guess my biggest thought is 10-ish so years ago, Smith's Trucking was wanting to develop the pit as well. And there was no rezoning, to my knowledge, there was no rezoning meetings as far as that goes. It was halted because Smith's Trucking was told that they were supposed to rebuild the road. That road is not a good road. Apparently it's just kind of gravel piled in and dirt, piled in and then gravel on top. So it's not a good road anyway. I've traveled on that road. It's horrible when the roads are wet. If there's snow or if there's rain or whatever, it's a really, really bad road. So our concern is going to be anybody who's traveling on that road, if that road is not rebuilt, that they are going to choose a different route. We don't know what there's going to be as far as if somebody does end up taking a different travel route, what our course of action could possibly be. So we're kind of calling to the county to step in, and as far as there's supposed to be a road assessment. There would have been a road assessment, I'm assuming, done back 10 years ago. And at that point, they were told that the road was no good. Smith's Trucking did walk away. So my thoughts are, I guess, is if this does if this does go forward, that Smith's Trucking is going to be a little upset because 10 years ago or 10-ish years ago, they could have gone ahead and done this pit as well. So that they have lost a huge income as far as that goes. The other thing was the groundwater. There was an assessment, or I'm sort of misunderstood. I don't know, they said that it shouldn't impact groundwater, but our concern is the possibility that it will definitely impact our groundwater, and I don't know what once again, the recourse will be after the fact. I know there was a package that was sent to us from our council, Shannon LaPriest. We didn't get a chance to go over it at all. We just received it at 10:31 yesterday. So I'm just wondering if maybe we can hold off this whole rezoning thing until we have a chance to go over the package properly and kind of given a better assessment. Because once we go through this package, there might be no reason whatsoever for us to even stand up here and say we're not necessarily opposed, but we are definitely concerned about some of the things that are going on as far as this goes. Yeah, like we had to have our information in April sent to the county for this meeting. And like I said, we only just got the package from McNair or from Shannon yesterday about what their plans are for us. So I guess it's just, we're not opposed to it. We're just very concerned dust mitigation wise for the haul route. I know we had spoken, well, I wasn't there, but they had spoken with McNair with regards to, they said that they can make sure that their trucks are always hauling to the south, but they have no control on anybody else buying gravel or getting gravel from the pit. So if there's anybody else coming from the north, our concern is, are they going to go past us and they don't even care? We would really like a dust fence, if that's at all possible. I don't even know if this is the place to ask for stuff like that. But like I said, the winds are always changing, and our concern is definitely dust mitigation for the business and for our health.
Good morning, Council. Just administration, just interjecting. So the presenter has exceeded the 5-minute limit. If Council wishes to continue hearing from the person in opposition, then they must pass a motion to do so. Thank you.
Do you have more to add, or would you like us to consider an extension to your time allotment?
I would ask to have a consideration for an extension.
I'll make a motion for council to extend the time allowed for opposition.
Would you provide an amount of time, perhaps an additional 5 minutes for this presenter?
An additional 5 minutes is likely good enough.
We can always reconsider after that if you have further points.
Okay, quickly look.
Any questions or discussion on the motion? I'll call the question. Motion is carried, so please proceed. Sorry, you have an additional 5 minutes to present if you would so choose.
Yeah, sorry. I think I think I pretty much have summed it up. Yeah, just hoping for a little bit of an extension for the rezoning meeting so that we can have, not for me to speak, but for the rezoning.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so we
We'll
can have a
have
chance
to-
to go over that package.
We'll discuss that. Administration will advise us on that. Administration did confirm that circulation was provided to all adjacent landowners. So the public hearing was scheduled for today. So typically it does conclude the day it is presented, but we can have our administration address that as well.
Yeah, because we just got our package yesterday. It's just been 24 hours. We haven't even had a chance, and it was a holiday. We didn't even get a chance to look at the package.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other members of the public who would like to present in opposition? I'll call again. Are there any members of the public who would like to present in opposition? I'll call a third time. Are there any members of the public who would like to present in opposition? I'll now open the floor for a rebuttal presentation by the applicant, limited only to the comments read or heard in opposition to the proposal.
I don't know that I have much to add at this point, but the primary concern being dust control. Like you said, there are mitigations that we can do, but she's not wrong. The wind does play a large component. Part of our operations plan is that if wind gusts do come up, we will halt operations until they settle down. Again, wind is not overly controllable, but operators often deal with these kind of concerns, and if the site is properly watered or there's other dust mitigations that you can put in place to minimize the amount of dust. A lot of times I see that, you know, agricultural practices, combining, disking can create a lot of dust as well that can play a huge role too. So there's things that we can do to limit an operational area though. So we will do our best, and we do have mitigations in place that go beyond just operating and hoping the wind doesn't come up kind of thing. So if there are issues that do come up, again, the door is always open, and they have our phone number to call if they're having problems that we can maybe try to address down the road. But right now we're doing our best with the equipment that we have, and the observation from staff while they're operating as well to help. So I think that's all I really have at this point.
Thank you. And an opportunity for final questions of administration.
I have a couple of maybe more like comments, I guess.
So just for clarification, we will reserve any debate regarding.
Until after.
Right. So this would just be an opportunity to ask questions as part of the public hearing. So comments perhaps might be most appropriate once we close the public hearing, but if there's clarifications or questions for administration, now is the time.
I guess I'll reserve till debate.
Yep. If you have any clarification or questions, please feel free. If you want to contemplate, we'll go to Deputy Reeve Clausen and we can always come back.
Thanks. Question to administration. Being that the county owns quite a few gravel pits, I imagine we have OH&S standards on what dust is, because we have operators in the sites, our own crews, and we have crushing crews out there. Do we know, is there any OH&S standard for dust in Alberta? Gravel crushing operations?
Through the chair, I don't know off the top of my head. I can find that out.
Because I mean, we are big, we have quite a few pits ourselves, so it's just something that you hear concerns of people, and I understand it, but usually it's where the employees on site is where that issue will be addressed first before public concerns, because they're the ones that are in the heat of it, so to speak. So
Yes, and just through the chair, everyone would be required to follow that, any employer, including the county. So that's
and
one thing.
I guess further to that, we're not looking at anything that would not follow OH&S standards.
Yeah, they would supersede
Yeah, for sure.
our
I just want to
jurisdiction.
make sure people knew that, so.
Any questions of clarification for administration? I do just have 3 questions just for my own clarity. So recognizing that we're contemplating the redesignation, but the development permit would be where we would control that no NRE activity would be permitted within the setback or buffer as outlined in the land use bylaw. That would be at the development permit stage specifically.
To the chair, that's correct. Based on the boundaries that have been proposed, that activity, you wouldn't be able to apply for a development permit for that activity outside of the designated area.
And then also just for clarification, it was indicated that the TIA would be required at the development permit stage, and that's when transportation potential upgrades or that type of thing would be addressed, not at redesignation. Is my understanding correct?
Through the chair, that's correct. That's also where we would look at the dust suppression requirements, which are usually included in the TIA, if not by our transportation department.
Okay. And then my final question, I just didn't hear a clear addressing. There was a specific concern on page 28 of the submission in opposition or with concern for the application around impacts to water supply. I know that that was addressed from a certain perspective in terms of depth of excavation and that type of thing. But the concern was expressed around vibrations from the heavy equipment. Can administration speak to if we are satisfied that that concern will be mitigated for groundwater, for water supply for adjacent landowners?
Through the chair, just to clarify, it's the impact vibrations might have on water supply to adjacent landowners?
Yeah, the adjacent landowners had expressed a concern about a potential impact to their groundwater supply from heavy equipment vibrations.
Through the chair, that's something we can actually require at the development permit stage through a study or report to confirm that that doesn't affect groundwater use by adjacent users.
I guess I do have one question that
Certainly.
maybe is appropriate at this point. What could we as a county do? So the applicant has indicated they'll use a haul route that will go south. What authority do we have to restrict neighboring landowners from buying gravel at that site and traveling north?
Through the chair, there's nothing at the top of my mind that would restrict folks from coming in, other adjacent neighbors from purchasing the gravel from the site. The haul route is specific to the business owners, trucks hauling that material off the site. So I may ask the manager of transportation here about bans on public roads, but that would still be for heavier hauling trucks, correct?
Yeah, correct. To the council, through the chair, that would be for the heavier trucks. For bans, it does relate to the full load of the allowable capacity of the road.
Any other questions of clarification for administration? Councillor Kester.
There was a comment made that the landowners didn't receive the package till yesterday. And I'm a little concerned about that, not adequate time. Can you answer why, or what do you usually provide in a package for because that was a lot of material there to go through, and if they don't know what they're doing, or if they have to ask help, or if they have to consult somebody, there just was a holiday. I just, in the interests of being fair and transparent, I don't think it's appropriate to close the public hearing at this time till they have an opportunity to consult with it.
Through the chair to Councillor Kester, I believe the council package and agenda was published last week on the county's website. And I know a link was shared with the applicant and adjacent landowners with concern. Perhaps clarity on the package we're referring to would be helpful. I believe it might be the package that was provided by the applicant.
So I can speak to that. So when I was reviewing this yesterday, I forwarded to the neighbor to the north, a link to our council package. I don't know if that's appropriate or not, so I don't know how it differs from what they would have received. You said we provide a link, so is that the same link?
Through the chair to Councillor Laprise, I had spoken with those folks in opposition to the application, providing information to the same link, the publicly available link with council package attached.
Can administration just speak to what is typically included in a notice of public hearing? And that we've been consistent with this public hearing with our process for notification of public hearings?
Yes, through the chair. Generally, the notification for a public hearing includes the bylaw number, the location of the site. We include the existing land use, proposed land use, and a brief description of the redesignation and the anticipated development at the site in the long run. And then we also include a diagram that indicates where the exact area to be redesignated is. This is circulated to adjacent landowners within 1 mile for NRE redesignations of the site and of the haul route. So that's a bit more fulsome notification. Right, and we also, once the county receives the application, send out a notification to the same landowners to let them know that it's been made to the county.
Through the Reeve to Council, in addition to what Taylor provided, the applicants, when the application first comes in, it is circulated immediately at that time. But prior to the public hearing, they would have been provided the pre-application engagement summary, the circulation package. They were invited to ask questions, and then we would have sent out the public hearing notice and provided the opportunity to answer questions. And that allows 15 days prior to the public hearing to provide responses.
Thank you. So administration is confirming that our normal processes were followed, that circulation was provided in a timely manner prior to the public hearing. There was the additional sort of courtesy provision of the link by the area councillor yesterday, but that all of that had been provided previously on our typical timelines.
Through the chair, that's correct. And just to add, when we look at what information was provided throughout this process, again, the land use bylaw does require that the consultant undertake their own engagement process before the application submitted. So there's an opportunity for folks to speak with the developer directly, and then they are required to provide a summary of materials provided and comments received, and then any mitigation that may be the outcome of those conversations. Then again, once the application was received by the county, we again engaged with adjacent landowners, and then in advance of today's public hearing, they receive a third opportunity.
Thank you for outlining that.
And just again, the consultation package is on page 86 here of the agenda package.
Any other questions of clarification for our administration? Hearing none, looking for Councillor Kester.
This page 86, applicant's community consultation package, that was made available to the neighbors prior to, or are they just seeing it?
Through the chair to Councillor Kester. So this package includes the letter that was sent by the developer, or the proposed developer, to the adjacent landowners. So we can see in this package the proposed activities. There's some mitigation measures discussed, and then it does include the landowner responses that the developer received as well.
I guess I'm just a little confused. If we could maybe get the original applicant up here and explain why weren't notified or what they're missing. That's the part I'm confused about. You're saying they got everything and she's saying she just got it, hasn't gone through. So I'm a little concerned with that. And
I feel that, but maybe I disagree, but the part that maybe they hadn't seen, but I do believe it was, I mean, it was put on our public site on Thursday, but it would have been our summary, our administration report. I think that'd be the only thing. Otherwise, all of the rest of it, I believe they have seen. It's been previously letters back and forth between them and the applicant. From my perspective, I'm comfortable that there's nothing new in the report that they haven't seen. I think they've been involved all along with consultations with the applicant. For me, yeah, there's nothing in our report that surprised me or was different than what I had seen previously. I think they would agree that if they had the time to review it all, there was nothing new in there.
The report from administration, and please correct me if I'm wrong, really summarizes the application information that has been provided to Wheatland County throughout this process, and then analyzes that in terms of our statutory plans and non-statutory plans for alignment. Is that accurate?
To the chair, that's correct.
So all of the information is consistent with what's been being presented from the, there's been some, it looks like minor amendments in response to feedback from maybe the original application in terms of trying to mitigate concerns, but that the operations and the intent of the application have been consistent from the original application, which, I mean, the vast majority of this, I believe 60 pages are from the presentation in opposition, or from the perspective of, I recognize there was a submission that it's not necessarily completely in opposition. There's some acknowledgement of the need for resource extraction, but outlining concerns and potential impacts on them as adjacent landowners. And that there was some repetition within that, but that encompassed, I believe it was 60 pages of, or if not, maybe slightly longer than 60 pages of the package. Councillor Kester.
You don't have to convince me, but it's disturbing for me to hear they didn't feel like they got the information in a timely manner. Process or not process, maybe our process. That's beside the fact, but during a public hearing, they felt they didn't get all the information until Thanksgiving Day. And that is concerning for me. A statement made like that to me in a public hearing. Maybe we should explain to them, but I'm not comfortable because this is their only chance to talk about this development bylaw, is the public hearing. And if they're not comfortable, I'm not comfortable. It's as simple as that.
So to your comment, Councillor Kester, that was my hope with the time that we have spent discussing this with administration too, so that we as a council can confirm that our processes have been followed. At times we do have concerns expressed with our process or expectations that are higher than our processes. The key is that we are consistent and that we are following, I believe we have a policy, and it's also outlined in the MGA in terms of how we provide notice specifically for public hearings for development. If administration could please confirm as well, recognizing there's not a public hearing at the DP stage, but there is an opportunity for written submissions in terms of concerns on impacts to adjacent landowners and proposed mitigations, or there is that opportunity as well, if administration can confirm.
Through the chair, because the activities would be a discretionary use, a similar notification will be sent in that radius, and we'll ask for feedback, comments, concerns at the DP stage as well for the MPC's consideration.
So it is important that we have a fair and obviously a public hearing that's consistent with our processes, but in terms of where the actual conditions come into play or that type of thing, if a redesignation is granted, that's where a lot of that detail is really fleshed out. And I think it will be really important that we have that feedback from potentially impacted adjacent landowners as well. Councillor Kester.
I'm aware of the processes. I'm aware of council. I'm aware of all that. But the people in the affected area aren't aware of that. They've been in the county for well over my age, and that's 72, because they're older than I am. They've been there, residents. They didn't understand, or they just got the message yesterday. That concerns me. Doesn't mean our policies weren't followed. Maybe our policies aren't up to snuff. That's a different topic. I'm just saying, I'm concerned that they're concerned they just got the information yesterday. That's my statement. I'm concerned. I don't feel it's appropriate to close the public hearing until they get an opportunity to come back up and ask or say that their concerns are answered now, or their concerns are this, and that. They would like another week. I would like to hear it from their mouth. Otherwise, I'll remain concerned. How do you be transparent and open to the public if you don't let them speak?
I guess I'm concerned that your statements are inconsistent with what our administration is telling us. Our administration is telling us that they are confirming that all processes were followed consistently with how we conduct notification for public hearings. I understand that we had a presentation by somebody in opposition and that they received information yesterday. What our administration has indicated is that they have provided all of the information on all of the timelines that are required both through our own internal processes and to align with legislation. And that's been confirmed by our administration. I'm not sure if administration has any recommendation in terms of the request to hear from the person who spoke in opposition.
So administration's thought on this is that we circulated in accordance with our policies. So it's been circulated, it was available. As for hearing back from someone again, I think council needs to review that procedure bylaw again. And I think that you've already passed that step of hearing from people. They've already had an opportunity to speak. That would be my main point.
Just your microphone.
I don't know if this is helpful or not, but when she spoke in opposition, she did say that she wasn't necessarily opposed to the project overall, but that their concerns have more to do with dust and things that will be addressed at the development stage. So for me, I feel like they would not be disadvantaged if we were to go ahead with this redesignation at this time. I think their concerns will come more at the development permit phase.
Yeah, and I think it's important to acknowledge the weightiness of the input that we receive during the public hearing. That is considered seriously by council, but that there is an additional opportunity for engagement. It's a different opportunity for engagement at the development permit stage, but there is that opportunity for engagement. And we've also heard a commitment from the applicant to have ongoing engagement in terms of mitigating those concerns. What council needs to keep in mind is that when we're contemplating a redesignation or a development permit, it's not applicant specific either. So we can't count on that commitment because applicants or owners or developers can change hands. And so we always do keep that in mind as well. But for clarification, there will be an opportunity to engage in terms of concerns around potential impacts at the development permit stage. It's just not during a public hearing. And so we do take this public hearing very seriously, and we take it very seriously that we're doing it consistent with our processes so that it's fair both to the applicant and to those adjacent landowners who may either support or be opposed to the application. So there is a lot of gravity to it. Deputy Reeve Clausen.
Good discussion here, but we're going into debate a little bit. The public hearing portion of this is where we listen. We did listen. I'm confident that we followed the policies that our council has set forward. That's the reason why that question is asked at the start of every meeting for public hearing, if we followed and did notifications and all that, and that we were answered clearly. If there is a fault in that process, we can't change that process midstream. This is the process that was engaged here. It's not fair to the applicant to try to do that. So with that, I'll move that council closes the public hearing for bylaw 2024-06.
We have a motion from Deputy Reeve Clausen. Any questions or discussion? I'll call the question. Motion is carried. We'll now move to council's consideration for first reading.
I'll move that council moves first reading of 2024-06, this being a bylaw for the purpose of amending land use bylaw number 2016-01 to redesignate plus or minus 32 hectares from agricultural general district to natural resource extraction processing district, as shown on the attached Schedule A, forming part of this bylaw.
Thank you, Councillor Laprise. Any questions or discussion on the motion?
I have some questions and
Yes,
comments,
certainly.
I guess I'll say at this point. Just wanted to say that I do think that the communication between the applicant and the residents has been excellent. There's been a long, some personal meetings and then an exchange of letters back and forth with a lot of, I would say, attempts at addressing the issues that the residents have. They have some serious concerns with their business and with their health. I like that the footprint is smaller and further away from their residents. I like that it avoids wetlands. It appears that the two parties have been working together in good faith and have an ongoing relationship. I do think that there will be some consideration at the development permit stage regarding the quality of the road, of the proposed access route. Like the person in opposition stated, it was abandoned 14 years ago because the quality of the road was not found to be acceptable at that time. I wanted to get a little more clarity maybe from the applicant at the development permit stage around, they talk about 75 round trips per day during peak times, and I'm kind of curious if they could identify what is the peak times? Is that a month out of the year, 2 months out of the year? Like just kind of given more of a understanding of how much traffic we are talking about over the course of the year. In a September 16th, 22 letter that's included in the package, the applicant offered that they will monitor and restrict the speed of the contracted trucks. And I wondered if that was still part of their plan or if it could be, and what speed they anticipate to restrict trucks to. I think it's very generous of the applicant to restrict processing activities, but also very necessary. The greenhouse, as we read in our package, the greenhouse business is very susceptible to dust in that critical growing season. And so the fact that they are willing to restrict their operations during that time is incredible, I think. They have specified operating hours of Monday to Saturday, 7 until 7. The resident has specified they would prefer 8 to 5, Monday to Friday. I wonder if they could consider that and if they can't accommodate that, maybe explain why in the coming development permit stage. I think I really like all of their attempts to mitigate the dust. That's the primary concern, I would say. And they've talked about spraying active areas with water in times of high wind or dry conditions. And so number one, I was wondering if they would be willing to stage a water truck on site so that when conditions do change, as we heard, winds change frequently and quickly in this province. And so if they could have ready access to that water. And I would also wonder if they could provide some parameters or triggers around what is considered high wind. Is that 30 kilometers an hour or is it something else? And what would be, and then they talked about ceasing operations in extreme wind. So what would extreme look like? Is that, how fast would that wind have to be? I really liked our engineer's recommendation that they retain an environmental monitor, but I guess I'd like some information about what that really means. Is that just looking at erosion and wetland effects, or does that also include air quality testing? That's another thing that they had kind of asked for, and I'd like to understand just what's involved with that potential of air quality testing, maybe in those peak times. And then I think they've talked about how they have a really great relationship in providing phone numbers and things like that, but I'd like to see just what kind of recourse the neighbors would have if things were not going to plan. Who could they call? Is there an escalation action plan if things are not coming as promised, kind of thing? So I guess in summary, I find that this applicant is working very hard to minimize the detrimental effects of their business on the neighbor. In particular, moving the development site further away, watering active site in windy conditions, ceasing the operations in extreme wind, limiting their operations to outside of that greenhouse growing season. I think all of these are very positive and show a willingness to work with the neighbor. So for this reason, I will support this application for rezoning and will wait for answers to those questions at the development stage.
Thank you, Councillor Priest. Any other questions or discussion?
I'll support the motion. Like you said, the applicants have engaged with the landowners. I think of one in my area where there was no opportunity for any engagement whatsoever, or public hearing. There no public engagement whatsoever. We fortunately turned it down and they won it on appeal. So there's always that in the future of this as well. So they've done above and beyond to engage. I realize that gravel extraction is not, it's the NIMBY, not my backyard. I get it, but it's also the basis of everything that we do to build a road, to build a house, to build anything. You need aggregate, and they've proven that. And I mean, it's just getting further and further out from the city because there's the big impacts of that. So it's going to be, we have gravel in our county. It's going to come from our county. We use it ourselves. We have several pits ourselves that we need to do. So I support it.
Any other questions or discussion? Yeah, I think I would echo many of the comments that have been made, and I appreciate the concerns that were expressed in opposition. And my hope would be, at this point, I'm considering supporting the redesignation with the hope that adjacent landowner impacts can be mitigated to the greatest extent possible through conditions on the development permit and through collaborative discussions between the business that's existing and the residents that live adjacent, and the proposed development. These are always very challenging decisions and obviously serious concerns being raised, and they'll need to be taken seriously if redesignation is approved and a development permit is pursued. I also believe there is some shared responsibility in terms of provincial oversight as well under the, I was trying to find the title of it, but this authorization they need to receive from the province as well. I believe there's some fairly stringent requirements for extraction under that as well. So if there's no further questions or discussion, I will call the question. I'll call the question. Motion is carried. Council's wishes.
I'll move that council do a second reading of bylaw 2024-06.
Thank you, Councillor Bigger. Any questions or discussion? I'll call the question. Motion is carried. Council's wishes.
I'll move that council grants permission to hold third and final reading of bylaw 2024-06, and I believe this has to be unanimous to continue. Okay.
Councillor Kester.
I'll be voting no. And all the public hearings I've ever sat through, I've never once heard. I got the information yesterday and I haven't had time to go through it. And there was no asking or finding out what. So I got to vote no. I feel like the opposition was shortchanged. Doesn't matter if you followed all the policies or not. That's their feeling. That was their statement. And we didn't able to correct it in any way. I'm not discussing. I'm just dejected that I wasn't able to help clarify the situation.
I think it's important to be clear as well that we did have a 60-page submission. I believe from the same, I recognize we were hearing from an employee, but outlining the concerns of the adjacent landowners, of which we did have a 60-page submission outlining those concerns for council to seriously consider within the context of the public hearing as well. Any other questions or discussion?
I can recall in a meeting not that long ago where we had some people here that said the very same thing upon investigation. People were away on holidays. Didn't fit their schedule, more like. That's unfortunate, but the only tools that we have in this toolkit is to set the policy. Staff follows the policy. We asked if staff follows the policy. They prove they follow the policy. If we want to change the policy again, we can, but that's another meeting. And they cannot have the applicant hold to something that hasn't been set. We set a process. They follow the process. I will be supporting the motion to follow third and final.
Any other questions or discussion? I'll call the question. So the motion is not passed unanimously, so we will not be considering third reading today. That will come forward to a future council meeting. And I'm going to suggest that we recess for 45 minutes. Let's reconvene at 1:15. Is everybody ready? Good afternoon. We will call the council meeting back to order. And let's move to agenda item 5, our consent agenda. Did anybody have anything they wanted to pull out of the consent agenda? If not, a motion to approve the consent agenda with no changes?
I will make that motion.
Thank you, Councillor Eichert. Any questions or discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor? That motion is carried. Let's move to agenda item 7.1. We had a request to discuss a meeting between our council and the WID board.
I've just been giving this some thought. And I think it's probably due, we haven't had a meeting with WID for quite a while now. So I think if we can set up a meeting, direct administration, just set up a meeting between council and the board. There's some new board members. And I think if we can maybe get out, have another chance to get out there and have a fulsome discussion on what we would like and what they would like, that maybe we can figure out a way to come together, because as we full well know, they're probably going to be the easiest access to water if any of our industries and that kind of stuff require water. So that's all it had. I'd make a motion to direct administration to see if we can set up a meeting between our council and their board.
Council's thoughts.
They are a good partner in the area. Definitely we won't, when it comes to water, dealing with them is probably one of the first steps. So absolutely, it's good to have a good established relationship with them. But we got to be careful that we have to also know administration's been negotiating with them on some other stuff too. So we got to be careful we don't step on toes or things like that. So keep that in mind, Mr. Reichert.
So perhaps a motion to direct administration to coordinate a meeting with the WID board and senior administration and our council and our senior administration.
I will make that motion.
Any questions or discussion on the motion? And if we can just add the senior administrations as well for both the Wheatland County Council and the WID board. Perfect. Any questions or discussion on the motion? I'll call the question. That motion is carried. Let's move to agenda item 7.2.
Yes. Good afternoon, Council. Brian from Administration. On page 129 of your agenda package is the Council Resolution Tracker. Anything in green is deemed ongoing. Anything in yellow is deemed, anything in yellow is deemed ongoing. Anything in green is deemed complete. If there are any questions about the Resolution Tracker, please let me know. Thank you.
Any questions? Council's wishes.
I'll move that council accept the council resolution tracker dated October 15, 2024 as information.
Thank you, Councillor Laprise. Any discussion? I'll call the question. Motion is carried. Let's move to agenda item 7.3.
Yes, good afternoon, Council. Brian from administration again. On page 141 of your agenda package, this is a housekeeping item. It's the memorandum of agreement for the Canada Community Benefit Fund. So this contract is on page, starts on page 144 of your agenda package and is in the package for your consideration. If there's any questions about this, please let me know. Thank you.
Any questions from council? There's no question, just a comment. I appreciate the accountability and the strong controls that have been built into the agreement by the government. I think it's fantastic. I know I have heard some feedback from other particularly small municipalities that the requirement to set up a separate bank account to hold these funds is being found to be arduous for some, but I assume for us that will be fine to accommodate that requirement. Council's wishes.
I'll make the motion that council authorize Reeve and CAO to sign the Canada Community Benefit Fund Memorandum of Agreement.
Thank you, Deputy Reeve Clausen. Any discussion? I'll call the question. Motion is carried. We'll move to agenda item 7.4.
Yes, good afternoon, Council. Brian again from administration. On page 153 of your agenda package is a new policy, policy 5.3.1, letters of gratitude. During the August 20th, 2024 council meeting, council did pass a resolution directing administration to draft a simple policy regarding thank you letters. And this had really to do with some provincial grant funding because there was no clear process put in place. Council did mention that they did want administration to proactively do a letter up and bring it back to council for approval, as council does recognize the important collaborative benefits of working with the provincial government. If there are any questions about this policy, or if council has any amendments to this policy, which starts on page 156 of your agenda package, please let me know. Thank you.
Council's wishes.
That council approve policy 5.3.1, letters of gratitude as presented.
Thank you, Councillor Bigger. Any questions or discussion? I'll call the question. That motion is carried. We'll move to agenda item 7.5.
Good afternoon, Council. Sherry Bars with administration to present a report to provide a property update on roll number 627-4000 located within Nameka. This property has been an ongoing issue due to tax arrears, deteriorating condition, and encumbrances out into the road. So we're bringing forward the cost that was associated with the cleanup of this property and everything with costs that weren't able to be recuperated and costs that the administration took for the cleanup. There were quite a few costs in the waste and recycling deposit fees because of the materials found in and outside, but some of those materials were things like the gasoline that had to be emptied out of some of the vehicles before they could be recycled, like lawnmowers, the tires removed for recycling. And as far as details to some of the expenses for the cleanup, we have Joel Chasson here from Finance to answer any specifics you may have on, on those numbers. That concludes my presentation, and we're available for any questions.
Any questions regarding the report? If not, yes, please go ahead.
Just a question to administration. Like, we know government works incredibly slow. We know that there's been issues with this property since 1994. So as administration learned it, like, is there anything we can do
Better.
to make this process better? As I remember that when Reeve Link first came on, that was her first order of business. That was 7 years ago. I mean, it's wonderful that it got done. That was 7 years. That picture didn't change that much in 7 years, so the picture that we got. I mean, it's been an eyesore for an awful long time.
Got more of an eyesore.
Yeah, but, so I'm just wondering, is there anything that administration has, that we've learned in this process that will, I'm hoping that this never, ever happens again, but if it does.
Through the Reeve to Council, yes, there were quite a lot of lessons learned from this particular property. There were things that, had we known before for enforcement and how to activate through the court system, we could have moved quicker. So having that knowledge now, we are starting to tag properties and take a more quicker, proactive approach.
Thank you.
And just to supplement some of GM Bears' comments as well, it was a huge learning lesson for administration on this one. Typically, I don't know if we'll ever encounter a property like this again, like to this extent. So a great kind of implementation of the lesson learned was that there have been abandoned buildings around the county, right from that did require demolishing. So we've actually went forward with a policy that we had set aside with the reserve funds in it to proactively take those down in a timely manner. This one was a little bit more complicated because there was a tenant were trespassing in the building at the time because it was a county-owned property. So a lesson learned again is that we had to go back to the court system, or go back to the court to get an additional clause in the eviction order. Just kind of the way the tenant was, but definitely a lot of lessons learned for sure. We probably could have expedited a little bit faster than it got done, maybe by 2 years, but big lesson learned from me personally, and I think a lot of administration as well.
And these lessons have been written down somewhere so that if the current administration is no longer there, that the future administration follow up on the rules or followed up on what you guys have done?
Through the chair, I don't know if we have it documented down, like a written procedure down. We certainly can craft one up and put it together, but it shouldn't be too hard if we can do that.
Through the Reeve to Council, yes, we have documented it. We do, yes, because we also, lessons learned out of this, that this is not a project that was isolated to any one department. It took all of the departments working together, everything through finance, through public works, through corporate services. So there were multiple departments that we had to coordinate work through. And so we documented it, and thanks to engineers being organized with their little task and what has to happen before that can happen, we did create task lists and document on how to take care of this in the future.
I just want to say thank you to the staff. They took on a tremendous amount of work, and we did a lot of this in-house, and it was an unknown factor in a lot of places where people are going in there, but it's something that needed to be done. It was a health risk, an eyesore, and there's so many different other things that have been, so we did a very professional job. I think a lot of this went up to the Drumheller landfill as well. Like I said, we did a lot of work in-house, and if we would have handed this off to somebody else, it could have been a lot more expensive. So, and it's from the sounds of it, all the crews basically stopped and focused on this for the period of time it needed to get it done. And I think the community's happy with it. I know it sets an example to the rest of the county. People out there that may be in that kind of going, oh, they're serious. Yeah, we're serious. You need to have, this was just in a really bad situation that needed to be dealt with. So thank you again.
And I would certainly echo the comments of gratitude to administration on behalf of our community and my ratepayers. There's significant gratitude from the community. I mean, the pictures speak for themselves. It's almost unfathomable to remember what existed there when you see the state of the county property now. And yeah, from a health and safety, public safety perspective, the county and our entire team, and I know it was all hands on deck that were available, and it is certainly appreciated so much by the ratepayers in that area. So thank you, and thank you for the transparency with the reporting of the costs. I appreciate that we did undertake processes to recover what we could. A lot of the delays with this were due to external judicial system proceedings that do take time. But I think as a council, we do just need to ensure that there is follow-up and accountability, and that we're addressing issues like this in the most timely way possible. And just, I think in terms of reporting mechanisms between administration and council. But yeah, overall, incredibly grateful for what's been done and the transformation of the property and of the hamlet. So thank you. Council's wishes.
I'll move that council accepts the property update report for the tax roll number 627-4000, located within Southeast 16, 2324, west of the 4th as information.
Thank you, Councilor Laprise. Any questions or discussion? I'll call the question. Motion is carried. We'll move to agenda item 7.6.
Good afternoon, Council. This is George Bloom from Administration. I'd like to bring forward an ASB bursary policy update. I'd like to apologize to Council and the Ag Service Board for not bringing this policy update sooner. At the October 4th, 2023, the Ag Service Board meeting, the following resolution was passed that the board directed administration to increase the budget for the annual ASB agriculture bursary program to $10,000 with a $2,500 per award maximum in the proposed budget. So that's increasing the original $1,500 to $2,500 while maintaining the $500 minimum limit. And this will provide flexibility for the bursary and award committee to award potentially more than $2,500 apiece, because last year we did have 8 applicants. So it is a fairly popular bursary. And we just had 3 people accepted for the full amount for $2,500 at the last amount. And I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Council's wishes.
I'll move that council approves the Agriculture Service Board bursary policy as presented. But I do have a question for administration, and that is, do we need to bring these to council? It's an ASB policy. I recognize that there's, in this particular case, it's a budget increase request, but I'm just curious if this is a normal process.
Through the chair, I'd have to review the ASB bylaw itself a little bit more closely. My apologies, just to understand if the ASB board can do that. The committee of the whole can for sure. Council can obviously amend a policy as well. So I have to just take a look at that ASB bylaw just to understand.
Any other questions or discussion? I'll call the question. And that motion is carried. Let's move to agenda item 7.7.
Good morning, Council. Brad Bullock presenting the revised leasing of county-owned land policy report. During the special council meeting held on March 12th, 2024, Council passed a resolution that Council directed administration to produce a revised draft policy, draft of County Policy 9.5.2, leasing of county property and present the proposed policy revisions to council at a future committee of the whole meeting. And the impetus for the update to the leasing policy was just in regards to some of the policy provisions in regards to right of first refusal and right of second refusal that after some legal review related to a advertisement of a particular leasing of a particular parcel of land, it was found out that the way that policy was written in the order of things for conducting the right of first refusal and right of second refusal was kind of outside of the tendering laws, and so administration has put together the revised policy for council's consideration. Attached to the report is the revised policy with the red showing what was deleted and the green showing what was added. Most of the red has actually just been revised or expanded upon. And so the intent of the original policy was aimed to remain the same. What we did was actually remove completely the right of first refusal and right of second refusal provisions in the original policy. And we didn't replace it with anything new, although if council does want to look at giving priority for leasing to adjacent landowners, there are processes for being able to do that. However, if council wants to publicly advertise land for lease, you almost have to do one or the other, but not both, or at least do both processes separately. And just maybe a little bit more information of that's not in the report. The MGA does require that any land that the county owns, if the county grants an interest in that land, it does need to be publicly advertised if it is leased for less than market value. And so you kind of have the two options. You can go and get a market evaluation, figure out what the valuation of that land is, and then lease it to one or just choose, the county can choose who they're going to lease it to, or do it for market value, in which case if you do publicly tender it, then you have your market value then and there. And so it's a little bit more of a process to do it the other way. And so because the policy contemplated both, it was our probably assumption that council was more interested in having this land publicly advertised. However, like I say, if council does want to look at giving priority to landowners, adjacent landowners to parcels that the county is leasing for agricultural purposes, those provisions could get added into the report, just in a different way than it was originally. I hope that's clear and ends my report if there's any questions.
Council's wishes. Councillor Kester.
If I was going to lease out any of my land, I would give priority to people I know, so they're going to treat it right. But if you rent it out to the highest bidder, I've seen land here get it, and we have nothing but trouble with it after a while. It's full of weeds and people don't look after it. So if we go for the highest dollar and they're poor stewards, can we terminate the lease early just for being a poor steward of the land?
To council through the Reeve, it would be possible to put provisions within lease agreements for things like that. I believe I'd want to check that legally, but if it was rented for agricultural purposes and not used for that or not kept up to standards, I would look into to see if there's provisions that we can put into the lease agreements to guarantee that. Otherwise, have a clause that it would end the lease agreement. We can investigate that.
Could you please look into it, because that would give the county, nothing gives it a bad name faster than a piece of land you have to drive by every day. Okay.
Council's wishes.
I'll move that council approves the revised policy 9.5.2, leasing of county-owned land as presented.
Thank
I
you.
think it's best to be transparent and advertise to anybody and consider all applications for county leased land personally.
Any other questions or discussion? I'll call the question. Motion is carried. We'll move to the addition, 7.8, letter regarding FCM conference attendance. So administration has circulated a draft letter. Has everybody had an opportunity to review it?
I had just one suggestion in the third paragraph, second sentence. I wondered if we should say we would like to explore the possibility of establishing a federal advocacy group. Just to provide clarity that it's we already have an advocacy group for rural municipalities. This would be federal. Besides that, I would make a motion to approve the letter as amended.
So Councillor Laprise has moved approval of the letter. Any questions or discussion?
One point just administration would like to make just through the chair is that I did put in here that just to respond to the letter no later than, I didn't put a contact information. It could be like, it would be addressed to the Reeve, I guess, an email through the letterhead or the footer of this letterhead. I don't know if council wants that in the actual letter itself, just to make it clearer to anyone potentially responding to this letter. That was the only thing I was like kind of on the fence about before giving the draft to council. Just something to consider. I just something to think about.
Practically speaking, I didn't know if it would be easier to encourage councils to send their own letter, or if we want to try and collect signatures. I'm anticipating there could be challenges just in having consensus around specific wording in a letter, whereas if we send a letter and we invite our colleagues across rural Alberta to also join us in sending a letter outlining their rationale, it just might make it easier for our administration and for us to not have to do that back and forth between 69 councils that are members of rural municipalities of Alberta. And then I also thought there might be some merit in also just copying this letter to the rural associations across Canada. I believe RME could facilitate contact information for administration. I know some provinces have specific rural provincial associations that represent municipalities, and others it's joint. So we would just perhaps target the rural. They may not circulate it to members. They may choose to circulate it to their members, but certainly through conversations with colleagues from other provinces, from rural municipalities, this isn't isolated to Alberta alone. So thoughts on, so it would just, the letter would stay the same, but it would be, the letter would be circulated to rural municipal associations across Canada.
So should we remove paragraph 4 though, and just
or what if we just took Alberta out?
from where? Alberta.
And then it's just initiating that conversation for rural municipalities across Canada.
Sorry, I'm not where in Alberta?
Oh, sorry, I was looking in the 5th paragraph. Sorry, let me look at the 4th paragraph. Oh yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah. So we could say to move forward, we propose those municipalities in agreement to send a letter to FCM.
Yeah, we call on colleagues across Canada to join us in sending a letter outlining your concerns to FCM. I think administration would be able to capture this language after from the recording. And then perhaps
And then your
in
suggestion
the fifth
to-
paragraph, sorry, just to strike Alberta's needs of, we could say Canadian rural municipalities. Oh, sorry. Maybe of Canadian rural municipalities and strike then possibly those across Canada. Thoughts?
Just a question from administration. So if we're just sending it to all rural associations in Canada, would we also want to strike the advocacy group that we're trying to, or I had in the draft letter here? Because then I don't think we're really looking to accomplish that with this letter. I think what now my understanding of the letter would be is just to request that other municipalities send their concerns to FCM directly instead of sending it to us or responding to this letter. Am I following that correctly?
I think we could include that we will be requesting the broader rural federal advocacy and association or some type of group. That's what you were speaking to. It's just kind of an aside that we're sharing with our colleagues across Canada. Is that how everybody else interprets it? So the call is sort of the unity, the strengthening of our voices by calling on other colleagues who may share the same concerns that we have to send letters. And then in addition to that, exploring how we can better address the needs.
Sort of a technicality, but should we send this to the Alberta rural municipalities and then CC other associations, rural associations across Canada? So
That's
they
what
can
I was
see that-
thinking.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Because I think it would be arduous to try, like, we're not going to be able to send it personally to the rural municipalities, the actual rural municipalities across Canada, but it would give those associations or their boards just the option to consider sharing this. Any other questions or discussion?
Sorry, so are we taking out paragraph 4?
I think we provided some amending language
Okay, just amended.
that administration could capture and capture the discussion, and that would be the final letter that would be sent, but we would approve it just as discussed, with amendments as discussed. So rather than saying a joint letter, it would just be calling for municipalities to send their own letter. Any other questions or feedback? I want to thank administration for the quick turnaround on a draft letter. We appreciate it. If there's no other questions or discussion, I will call the question. Motion is carried. Let's move to the addition to the agenda 7.9. Ratification for Councillor Laprise's attendance at the ASHA Regional Convention.
Yeah, just looking for
Attendance
council's
and
approval. Yeah.
Mileage. Were there other expenses?
DM and
Parking?
mileage. No other expenses. Yeah, it was a really good, worthwhile convention or conference to be at. So yeah, just.
Council's wishes.
I'll make the motion that we ratify Councillor Laprise's ASHA per diem and mileage.
Thank you, Councillor Eichert. Any questions or discussion on the motion? I'll call the question. Motion is carried. Let's move to our closed session agenda items. I'll move us into closed session. Call the question. Motion is carried. Everybody, I will move us out of closed session. Call the question.
Yes.
Motion is carried, and we have 4 motions arising regarding closed session agenda items. We'll start with CAO performance evaluation.
I will move that council direct the manager of people services to coordinate with balanced and restorative HR to facilitate the biennial 360 performance review of the chief administrative officer for the 2024 calendar year.
Thank you, Councillor Priest. Any questions or discussion on the motion? I'll call the question.
Yes.
Motion is carried. We'll move to the motion arising regarding East Calgary Regional Waterline Servicing Request Update.
I will move that the ECCRWL servicing be accepted as information.
Thank you, Councillor Eichert. Any questions or discussion? I'll call the question. Motion is carried. We'll move to the motion arising regarding the gravel pit lease renewal. It's in the RFD that was circulated with supplemental documents. We've got it on in our email. Shanna has the the recommended motion on the screen.
I'll move that council authorize the Reeve and CAO to sign the gravel pit lease agreement renewal for portions of the lands located at South 3, 2517 west of the 4th for the purpose of gravel production for road maintenance activities, whereby the agreed upon royalty rate is to be paid on a per ton basis annually for all gravel produced by the county from the lands to commence on November 5th, 2024 for a term of 5 years.
Any question or discussion on the motion? I'll call the question. Motion is carried. Finally, we'll move to the Lakes of Muirfield RFP update.
I'll put the motion forward that council directs administration to proceed as discussed in the closed session.
Thank you, Deputy Reeve Clausen. Any questions or discussion on the motion? I'll call the question.
Yeah.
Motion is carried. And that brings us to the conclusion of our agenda for today. Meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everybody.